This is gonna be, I'm gonna be like, I'll get whiplash trying to engage everyone. We're not starting yet. I'm just killing time.
Keep you awake.
Yeah, that's true. Keep someone awake.
Watching you turn.
Yeah. No, me. You guys are gonna doze off. But did everybody grab their nice, refreshing can of Yes? If you didn't, go get one. There's some books here if you want them. There's pens. We have a little bit of literature if anything sparks your interest and you want literature. We can do that too.
What does Yes taste like?
It's just sparkling water. There was we tried to get energy drinks, and there was some rule at some event that we were doing, not this one, that you couldn't do energy drinks, but you could do sparkling water. And so we had to go lowest common denominator and buy the best we could.
Probably a healthcare event.
Yeah. No. It was an IT event, wasn't it? Okay, I think I'll start. So thanks for coming and for spreading out again. My name's Todd Peterson, and it says there that I'm the IAM evangelist, and that's just a title we put because it sounds better than marketing guy. But I'm a marketing guy, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. The next two sessions by our technical guys will be like the truth and the non-fluffy stuff. But hopefully there's something here that's of value to you. What we are, so Dell Security is a business unit that Dell set up probably 6, 8, 9 months ago. And it's the combination of our IAM solutions and our network security solutions to kind of offer an end-to-end place to go for all things security related. Some of it came from SonicWall when Dell acquired SonicWall, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. The IAM stuff came from Quest Software when that was acquired maybe 3.5 years ago. And then we combined and now we are this amazing, wonderful thing called Dell Security. And if you stop by our booth, you notice that our little theme, our slogan, our mantra right now is to become the Department of Yes. What we mean by that is normally all of us in security, our job is to tell people no. People want this access to this new application. Well, no, you can't have it until I've proven that it's secure and it's not going to put us at risk. Or, these people now want to access stuff from their mobile device. I'll say yes, but I'm going to make it really difficult so you're not going to want to do it. So what we're hoping to do is to help people get from this kind of habit and knee-jerk reaction of saying no all the time to being that where you can actually say, yeah, you can do that because I know it's going to be secure, I know that it's under control, and I know that as long as you're not trying to do something wrong, that I should allow you to do it. So that's what our kind of mission is, and that's the direction we're going. And that's kind of the theme of this, how do you turn your identity and access management specifically from being the thing that is in the way of productivity, in the way of progress, in the way of whatever, to something that's actually furthering the business, making money, serving the citizens, or whatever the mission of your organization is. How do you make this the thing that actually helps that happen as opposed to getting in the way of it happening and being resented? So what's your IAM project? So what are you involved in right now as far as IAM? What's the thing that concerns you the most or that's taking all your time?
Never going to sit in the front row. I know, right?
Yeah.
Migration to the cloud, controlling access depending on where the device is coming from, device context, probably.
So
not just identity context, but device context.
Right.
Playing a role in triggering an FA.
Yeah, kind of this newer generation of things that we have to worry about that we didn't have to worry about, 7, 8 years ago. In the back, orange shirt, what's your project right now?
Well, it's a lot more, one of the biggest concern is attribute definition, agreement, metadata, definition agreement.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the governance stuff, that's the big.
Right. It seems to be a lot of people are, they've kind of got the provisioning taken care of, or at least they've given up on trying to get it taken care of, and they've moved on to the governance stuff. Anybody really involved in a privileged account management project right now? I mean, that seems to be huge. Every breach is a problem there. We're all here because we've either sort of taken care of or are planning to take care of the federation single sign-on, type stuff. But for a lot of people, that's the end-all, be-all. If I could just, get the boss to quit forgetting his password, everyone would be happy. So it's a lot of stuff. Years and years ago, it was self-service password reset or provisioning. Now it's governance, and it's, attributes, and it's, context-aware adaptive security. It's all these things. It's going everywhere, but they're all important, and there's nothing that says which one you should do and which one you shouldn't do. So in our years of dealing with customers and helping them and seeing the ones that succeed and seeing the ones that fail and seeing the ones that are out shopping and why they're out shopping, we've learned some things that really, a kind of a recipe for success. Here's some things that if you worry about these first, you're going to set up your chances of success a lot more than if you, don't worry about them. So the reason is because identity and access management is absolutely critical to everything that you do. So you got to protect your people and things, your systems, your intellectual property, customer data, user access, the growing need for mobile user access, and then you've got your super users you need to protect too. So you've got all these things that you have to protect, and it's difficult to protect them all. You can't just flip a switch and they're all protected. Some things require different things. Some things have been around longer and they're protected one way, but a new thing doesn't get protected the same way. But it's all important. So why is it important? This is really remedial for all of us, because all your stuff is really valuable. You wouldn't be in business if you didn't have something of value that you're trying to deal with and to sell or to serve or whatever. And people want to get your valuable stuff. And you have people that work for you that need that stuff in order to do their jobs, to make you money or whatever. And they don't want it difficult to get to their stuff. They want to get what they want, when they want it, in the way they want it, and they don't want you getting in the way of that. A lot of times we have someone who says we have to secure things. You have regulations, you have compliance, you have the boss that says, make it easy but make it secure. There's bad people trying to get to our stuff. We read every day about the hack du jour, that they got something. We got good people that are trying to do the right things, but they sometimes do stupid things. Lame password policy, write their passwords down. We've had customers that a well-meaning Active Directory administrator fat-fingered something in ADUC and deleted a whole domain controller, and brings the whole company down. You got those types of things happening just because people are people. You don't want to be the next security breach, obviously, and it's just the right thing to do. If you're secure, you're better, your company's better, your customers are happier, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so we've seen there's thousands of reasons why you run a project, but we've seen some really common ones, and they all kind of fall into these 5 categories. First one is you have people that need access to a new system or in a new way. You bring up a new cloud application, how are people going to access that securely? Or you have a new group of people that need access to something, or maybe your remote users are growing and you need them to have access. So you need to deal with that, and identity and access management is one of the ways that you can. The other one is something bad happened, or you've seen something bad happen to somebody else and you don't want that to happen to you, the breach du jour, as I talked about. The other one would be users or executives are demanding something, kind of the digital transformation. I saw this thing that was really cool and I want you to do it. And I really don't care how hard it is for you to do, and you're going to do it without spending any more money, and it's going to be so awesome when we have it, and I'm going to look great, but you go ahead and take care of that for me. The other one is, transitions and growth, mergers and acquisitions, shifts in populations. You bring two companies together, you have to eventually get those identity and access management principles aligned. But how long does that take and how difficult is that? And then a lot of times it's to clean up a mess that's been built over time. If you've been around for a while, you have legacy systems that you secured 12 years ago in the very best way you possibly could then. It was probably cutting edge technology and these amazing practices, and you secured everything, but then the next thing came, and this thing you secured over here, you can't lift those practices and use them on the next thing, and then the next thing. So you end up with this kind of tangled web of user rights and authentication mechanisms and roles and processes and workflows and lots of different tools that are fundamentally doing the same thing, but doing it on different systems or in different scenarios or whatever. So you've got this mess, and a lot of the customers that we see, at some point, the mess gets so big that they decide, I've either got to fish or cut bait. I'm either going to continue with this mess forever, or I'm going to find a way to clean it up. And so those are, the top 5 reasons we see. There's a lot more. How many of you, which is your most important? We'll ask you. Which of those is the last one? Anyone else with the last one is the big one? Yeah. How about the mergers and acquisitions and growth and transition? Is that hitting anybody right now? Yeah. Any others? What's yours? Mergers and acquisitions. You just didn't raise your hand. Yeah, thanks. Anybody with like this new access needs and new user populations? That seems to be really big. Kind of the digital transformations, kind of digitally screwing things up, isn't it? All right. So what you do?
Sorry, I would also
Yeah.
add that you can combine some of those.
Oh yeah, totally.
In other words, getting new functionality through a merger or acquisition.
Yeah.
If you're smart.
Well, and new functionality because the boss demanded it, because the boss wanted the merger or acquisition, and that brought new users, and yeah, they're all interrelated. Yeah. So you engage in a project of some sort. This was actually, this deck was delivered by a guy in Europe, and he changed this slide to in one guise or another, and it really bothered me. It sounded too pretentious, so I changed it back. So some of the projects you have, the list there, they're all familiar. You've seen them all the time. You've probably all done them or are doing them or will do them. The problem is that it's this difficult balancing act. A lot of times we do the project either to make life more convenient, so to streamline stuff, get people to work faster and better, or to secure things. And the two normally don't mix very well. It's a tough balancing act. If I want to be really secure, it's going to be less user-friendly. If I want to be really user-friendly, maybe security has to be the thing that goes. But that's not acceptable, obviously. So does your project become a barrier or an enabler? So ask yourself, the last project that you worked on or the one that you're currently in, does it make your users' lives easier? Or does it add another hoop they have to jump through? Are your people looking for workarounds? The classic, write your passwords on the Post-it note and slide it under your keyboard. But you have all kinds of things now. I worked at a company, we won't say who and we won't say when, that due to a merger and acquisition, in order for me to get to the corporate, like the HR system to, do my benefits and stuff, I had to log into my old VPN, which was kind of a crappy VPN and took about 5 minutes for it to finally negotiate everything and get me logged on. And then I had to log on to a new VPN, and I had to do them in that order. The new VPN was a little bit better, but it still took a minute or two to log on. And then I had to use multi-factor authentication. And then I could get to the portal, and then I'd have to pull out my Post-it note and find the password for the specific application and log that one in. So to do something as simple as say, yeah, I took my sexual harassment training, in order to do something as simple as that, I had to wait like 15, 20 minutes and do nothing because it was all working. And then if it got broken, then I have to call IT, and IT thinks I'm an idiot, and I think they're really mean, and so I don't want to call IT. You know, so I find workarounds. You know, how many of you have users that, you know, something that you've secured, they're just going to upload it to Dropbox when they're at the office and then pull it down at home and then work on it and then load it back up and, you know, take it back rather than go through all of the security measures you put in place. You know, that happens all the time. Another way to decide if it's a barrier or an enabler is how much does IT have to get involved? I think of the classic, you know, you just hired a new user, how long does it take for them to be fully provisioned, up and running and everything they need? And how many emails and forms and approvals and different people did you have to talk to in order for this guy to get the access that he needs? And how much guesswork was involved? How much was it, you know, give George the same access as Joe, and you're not even really sure whether Joe has the right access? Another thing is, do people do things for themselves? So it's kind of the flip side of the how much IT involvement is required, but is that an enabler? You know, obviously, the more people can do things for themselves, the more enabled they are, the more you're able to say yes as opposed to no. And then finally, did it decrease or increase complexity? You look at, you know, the growth, you know, way back when we had dumb terminals and mainframes, things were really, really simple. You had this one 6-character password, I think they were. You logged on and you got your stuff. And then, you know, client server comes along, and now cloud, and now SaaS, and now this, and now that. And, you know, it's all complex, and it seems to be getting more and more complex. And as I mentioned earlier, the knee-jerk reaction is to solve the problems by adding more complexity. You know, that's going to get in the way of people getting what they want. All right, so here's the top reasons we see these projects stall. Not necessarily fail, some of them fail, but, you know, slow down, get bogged down, become more of a no than a yes server. First one is they get run as an IT project. The second one is the business doesn't provide funding or support, or maybe translated the way the business doesn't understand the importance and isn't, you know, fully bought in. Poor understanding of the existing landscape. You try to solve a problem without taking into account what's already there and what's going on, and, you know, what pitfalls you have built for yourself, but also what opportunities you have for yourself that you may not recognize. Assuming systems have boundaries. So, you know, this is on-prem and it's only going to be on-prem always, never going to change. Allowing the scope to creep. We're going to start out with self-service password reset, and we're going to end up with, you know, enterprise provisioning, governance, and mobile management or something. You know, that happens all the time. And your budget didn't go up, by the way. Or trying to deliver everything at once, trying to boil the ocean. So we'll go through with some examples. These are all real-world examples. I won't tell you who the companies are. So the first one is running projects, not a program. So looking at this, a myopic view of what you're trying to accomplish. I'm just going to do this, you know, not this. So does this sound familiar? You've got a manual process for provisioning Active Directory with native tools. You know, you've got some forms, you got some IT guys that get online and do that stuff. And then you have a highly customized provisioning framework for the rest of the enterprise that may or may not be good. You've bought a solution for authentication to federated applications. We're all here, so we obviously all did that. You have a homegrown solution for authenticating to internally developed applications that aren't federated. You have another one for single sign-on to thick client on-prem apps. You've got a managed process for privileged password management. You've got an Active Directory bridge, so that takes care of some Unix privileged account management for you. And you've got self-service solution for resetting passwords. And you bought those over 10 years. You bought them from whichever vendor, you know, did the best job of selling it to you, or you build it yourself because none of the vendors did a good job. They don't necessarily talk to each other. They don't necessarily work together. They don't necessarily build on each other. So I'm aware of a document management company that was in this exact boat. Over 10 years, they had a framework, one of the big, you know, expensive ones that have been there forever. They had one of those. They had gone out and bought another solution for privileged account management. They had another solution from someone else for AD management. They had another solution for single sign-on, and a lot of lack of solution for single sign-on. They had single sign-on in some areas and not in others. And then they had another solution for password management. None of these worked together, and, you know, just was getting worse. More complex, more IT involvement, more telling people no, more angry users, more IT guys that think the users are idiots. So keep that one in mind. We'll come back to them. Next one is assuming that technology will solve the problem itself. So you're all familiar with the traditional IAM frameworks. I won't name names, but they've been around for a long time. They're really big companies. Many of us have probably worked for some of them. The problems with these frameworks is they don't do everything that you need. They generally maintain complexity. They solve complexity by adding complexity, kind of hiding it under some more complexity so that you can get your own unit. How many of you have been involved or have heard of somebody who's 6 years into their 3-year IAM project and, you know, a couple $1 million over budget? Constant stream of consultants and developers because it's entirely customized. You know, you're building this kind of to-purpose, although all the applications aren't customized. You know, there's standards you could use. Unfulfilled expectations, we'll talk about that in a bit. And as requirements change, you know, you started this 6 years ago. You know, have your requirements stayed the same in those 6 years? Yet you're still building to the spec you originally developed. All right, so this is a Fortune 100 company I've heard of, and luckily I can't even remember who it is because it's embarrassing. So they had one of these traditional IAM frameworks. In order to build all of the business logic and all of the here's how you provision this and here's what it means to be this person and here's what you're going to do here, they hired 16 full-time Java developers. And it took them 2 years, and those 16 Java developers, who aren't cheap, were able to build provisioning to one application that was Active Directory, nothing else in the hundreds of applications they had, and they couldn't even deprovision Active Directory. So really, really bad investment. But, you know, it was as good as they could do at the time. Keep that one in mind. Next one is automating the existing processes. So how cumbersome are your automated processes? Run into people all the time that have, you know, this great automation, which is you're going to click on this button in a portal, and then 10 PDFs are going to spill out, and you're going to fill each one in. And then you're going to mail them to all these different people. But, you know, it's a mailing list, so it goes to them, so that's automated. But, you know, there's all this stuff that you've kind of hacked together to make it happen. Are you actually provisioning everything you need? You know, how quickly is a new employee actually fully productive? This is embarrassing for Dell. We just hired a new sales guy, and I was, you know, giving him a little, you know, briefing. Here's the stuff that you're going to be selling. Here's what it does. And he had been working there for 4 days, and I said, oh, so tell me what you have access to right now. And I think there's 10 major things he needed access to, and he had 2 of them so far. And they had specifically told him that the one he needs most, which is access to Salesforce.com, was like 3 weeks away. So this guy's hired to sell stuff, but he can't use his CRM system until 3 weeks from now. So, you know, I'm sorry, that was us. And we'll get better, I swear. So who's driving the bus? Who makes these decisions? Is it the business saying, here's how it needs to happen? Or is it IT saying, here's how it has to happen because this is the only way we do it? You know, and who's actually accountable if it goes wrong? Is it the business or is it IT? And then governance. You know, that's kind of the holy grail. We all try to, in this little red book, if you want one, we got plenty. We liken identity and access management to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So remember, in Maslow's hierarchy, you have like at the bottom is just, you know, staying alive stuff, and at the top is stuff that makes you happy. So self-actualization. If you think of identity management the same way, at the very bottom is just giving people access. At the very top is governance, which means they have the right access at the right time in the right way, and all the other people that need to know and approve of it say that it's okay. You know, are you actually getting there, or are you kind of stuck in these lower, just surviving type of levels, and how can you get there? All right, so example of this one, we know of an oil and gas company that had, and I can throw out the name because it no longer exists, they had a Sun identity and access management framework. They had taken 3 years to customize it, to build all this stuff so that it could, you know, provision their people to all their stuff. And it wasn't an incredibly complex environment. It was, you know, about average. They didn't have any way for people to ask for access. So if I wanted access to an application and I worked at this oil and gas company, I had to like send emails to people. I couldn't just automatically say, I want access to Oracle or to, you know, SAP or whatever. And it had no governance. So it was basic provisioning, but no attestation, no ability to prove that that provisioning was actually right. And it took them 3 years to get to that point. After 3 years, we all know what happened to Sun. And so they had to make a switch. They had to do something because they couldn't survive with Sun anymore. We'll get back to what they did. So the consequences of this type of approach is tons and tons of inefficiency. Lots of audit exposure, because with all this inefficiency, there's stuff that's going to fall through the cracks. There's stuff you're going to do the best you can, but it may not be good enough. And it's inflexible. Once you build it, if you want to change something, you have to, redesign, retest, redeploy, and it may be too late by the time you get it out there. So ultimately, it's a project that doesn't deliver what you expect. Right. So the recipe for making your project a success, or what we would call how to become the Department of Yes. The Department of Yes. I needed a drink anyway, so that was perfect timing. So here's the things that we know work. Number one, get the business sponsorship from the outset. If you're trying to justify it after the fact, it's really hard to do. But if the business feels it's important, it's easier to do. Run a dedicated IAM team. We find that the most successful projects are when it's not just IT doing it or security doing it, but there's a team dedicated to making the identity and access management project a success. That's a key. Understand where your critical assets lie, what matters most and what doesn't matter. Not an IAM story at all, but one of our, we have these guys at Dell called fellows. Just means you're super smart and you have to have like a number of patents and you've been at the company for a certain number of years. One of our Dell fellows is a guy named Tim Brown. And he was telling me he was meeting with a bank, one of the top banks in New York, can't remember which one, and they were talking about, they have so much stuff they need to secure, how do they decide what they secure? And so they evaluated the risk associated with a breach on every system, every scenario they had. And they determined that unless a breach was going to cost them $1 billion a day, it wasn't important enough to worry about right now. So only the $1 billion a day breaches were worthy of their attention. And then once they get those taken care of, then they'll go down. So I'll take the 990 million breach. So take a risk-based approach rather than focus solely on ROI. I know that companies are very, very focused on, is this going to give me return on my investment? But with security, and with IAM in particular, the correct stance is this going to reduce my risk? Because in a perfect world, we wouldn't spend any money on security. You could trust everybody, everything would be fine, and we'd all save all that money and we'd make more money as a result. But we're not in a perfect world. So how do you justify those investments other than by reducing risk? Focus on good business governance, not just good processes, I guess. And then play to the strengths of the technology you choose and adapt to fit that rather than trying to build your own. So minimize customization. So this is a technology company. I won't say who it is, but I receive paychecks from them. They had both the Novell and the Oracle frameworks in place. Novell was doing provisioning, Oracle was doing something, other type of provisioning. Anyway, so they had them both in place, okay? They were running okay. They were 2 years ago, they went through a full review and decided that it was the best, I guess it was 4 years ago, it was the best they could do, and that was the best solution for this company. It required 3 people on IT that their whole job, every day, all day, was to provision users. So it's a big company, but three guys doing that. So they were able to take this kind of antiquated, old school identity and access management approach and replace it with a more modern kind of business-centric governance combined with processes approach, which George will talk about in 2 hours or hour and a half, to replace that. So years and years and years of kind of stumbling along with this process in, I think it was 19 weeks. Is that right, George? 19 weeks from first starting the project to finishing the project to fully replace all of that, all those processes, all that stuff. But it also added governance on top. So in addition to just taking care of the provisioning need, which is huge, you get provisioning right, everything's good, it had governance on top of it. All 3 of those staff were able to move on to, not on from the company, on to more important, cooler, more fun projects. 18 weeks to value, I guess it wasn't 19, it was 18, and it included governance. So just by the new way to look at things, not being stuck in, well, this is the way it's always been done, I'm just going to have to live with that, solve the problem here. So the next one is get provisioning right. So remember that oil and gas company that had the Sun framework, and they had their own custom built, they built it for themselves, self-service access request portal. And it was exactly like I described, It was this really cool portal, but it just generated a lot of emails and forms to fill out, and it really didn't automate anything. So this company, 3 years trying to make it happen with Sun, couldn't do it. They accomplished everything that was in their original Sun statement of work or statement of wish maybe in 14 weeks. They replaced their homegrown self-service access request with one that's all just part of this, that automatically will provision whatever you need when you request it if it's approved. They immediately automated 50% of their provisioning tasks. So just on day 1, that cut the manualness, I guess, if that's a word, which I just made up, by 50%. It included governance, which wasn't even on the radar for the first stuff, and they were able to move on to phase 2, much, much, much quicker. So reducing complexity, get provisioning right, and kind of everything else falls into place much, much, much easier. Next one, put the business in charge. So this healthcare organization, this one's in Canada. It's a teaching hospital, so it had not only the patient care end, but it also had the education angle. They had done several mergers and acquisitions, as is really common in healthcare. So they had just kind of stuck all this stuff together. So they decided to finally get it right. They went for the same approach of kind of this modern integrated, put the business first, get provisioning right from the start. Do governance not as an afterthought, but built in from the ground up. They were able to do that and immediately satisfy all their compliance demands. Now, you still have practices that make you compliant, but they put the foundation in place that allowed them to become compliant much easier. They were able to drive their identity information out of the HR system. So for both the students and the patients and the doctors and staff, whatever their status is in this authoritative data source, that's what determines what their rights are here and there, everything that is so critical to compliance with healthcare. And they were able to extend this, which was previously just a bunch of disjointed, a student system, a staff system, this hospital's HR system, this hospital's provisioning system, get them all working together because they were all unified in a common single source of the truth, I guess, if you will. Next one is automate and enable. So remember we talked about that document management company that had over time bought a bunch of best of breed solutions to do, point things at point times, but it ended up being not very well integrated. They at one point realized that that wasn't the right thing to do. But they had so much invested in it that they were kind of piecemeal, as opportunistically is maybe a better word, they were opportunistically replacing things with the right thing. So they had this big framework. They invested a lot of money in it. It was doing provisioning for them. But it didn't necessarily take care of Active Directory all that well. So they went out and looked for an Active Directory management solution that would integrate with this IAM framework. So they found one, and then all of a sudden that made all of the heavy lifting for Active Directory taken care of by this specialized solution that did it for Active Directory that would allow it to communicate with the IAM framework. So then they said, oh, well, okay, that's cool. What about these Unix systems? Again, lots of customization to get all the Unix systems, and they had thousands of them into this IAM framework that they had. But what if those were just tied to Active Directory? So they took their Active Directory bridge, that acted as the connector to the IAM system for all of Active Directory and solved another big chunk of their problems without having to rip and replace what they'd already put in place. Then they added, when single sign-on came up and new types of single sign-on, they had some web apps, so now they need federation. Just simply add something there, but that will communicate with what they've already got in place and will work with the things that they've been adding over time. Self-service password reset, again, does it work with the framework or does it compete against it? For these guys, they found one that worked with what they had. Eventually, they got to the point where the framework became pretty much obsolete, or at least not keeping up with what they had, and it was about time for a refresh. So they then went for the framework that would have, from the start, solved all this problem, but they came in from the backside. But this planned, logical process of growth through the life cycle of their identity management program gave them the exact right thing for them by the end, as opposed to this, kind of a blockhead approach of it's just going to fall down eventually. Simplify your data before you start. So this is a very old story, but it's a good one, and it illustrates the point. So this bank, it's one of the biggest banks in the country, had all of their retail tellers had 12 Unix applications, they may have been Linux, Unix or Linux applications that they had to use to do their jobs. So tellers are, they're not your career lifetime employees. They're a little bit transient. They're, a little bit younger. They're not quite as security conscious. They're not quite as, technically savvy as some other employees. So they had a lot of password reset issues because, you wouldn't allow them to write them down. They forget their passwords all the time. It was costing them about $1 million a month to reset passwords at all their branches for tellers that had forgotten their passwords. So that's a pretty big bill every month. So they did the classic Active Directory bridge. Everybody also had an Active Directory account for Exchange, and so they just joined those Unix systems to the Active Directory and eliminated those passwords entirely. So immediately on day one, it dropped 30%, and then over time it dropped to almost nothing for those password resets, just by simplifying the data, getting away from a UID and a GID on every single Unix box representing every single teller to kind of a single identity in Active Directory that would solve it. That can be extrapolated to whatever you've got. You have an authoritative data source. You have things that matter and that are important. Why duplicate those things in another system when they already exist here? Find a way to leverage those things on another system as opposed to, repeat them or try to duplicate them when it may not work. And then always look forward. So this manufacturing company was preparing for a move to the cloud and kind of saw the potential for getting it really wrong because they had these old ways of doing things. They realized they weren't going to work, and rather than trying to retrofit their old systems into this kind of new paradigm, they decided to try to do it right from the start. So they did. They were able to get rid of all their cumbersome manual tools in favor of a business-centric approach to IAM, where the decisions made on what it means to be you and what you should access isn't made by IT, because IT doesn't know. It's made by your boss, because your boss absolutely knows. The fact that you set those things up in that manner allows you to put the people that matter or whose butts are on the line if something goes wrong are the ones who are responsible. So the line of business is going to try to do it right or want to do it right because they're the ones who are accountable if it goes wrong, not IT. IT is going to do the best they can, but just because they know how doesn't mean that they should. So we need to find ways to enable the line of business to do it because they know why, not just how. So give them the ability to do the how. And they overcame their audit findings, so they were able to expand to this new, cool cloud stuff that they were after without increasing risk, without exposing themselves to more danger, and actually by reducing it because they got everything right. So where can you turn for help? A couple of key takeaways. focus on what matters most to you and to your organization. Is it privileged accounts? Is it customer accounts? Is it, privileged information? Whatever is the most important thing, focus on that first, as opposed to focusing on what's easiest. Include external systems where possible. A lot of times we'll see the danger of we're only going to do it for the things that we have control over. We can't control these SaaS applications, so we're not going to try. But you can. You can control the user rights on those. You can do all that type of stuff. Build the team of experts. As I mentioned several slides back, run IAM as a project with an IAM team as opposed to just another IT project along with, your operating system refresh and your, new servers and stuff. Get the right people in hand to do it. And remember that the whole point is to become this yes man or yes woman. Get it right. Make IAM a business enabler, something that makes money or serves the citizens or, furthers your mission, not something that's a necessary evil just to make sure that nothing bad happens to you. And the way you do that is by doing it right, putting the business in charge, and with this mindset of what's going to reduce our risk without getting in the way of people doing their jobs. And that is it. I'm happy to answer questions. We got 10 minutes. Yeah.
One of the earlier slides you said, have your own IAM team drive for success. At the same time, in one of the later slides, you talked about let business drive it and not the IAM IT.
Mm-hmm.
So that sounds a little bit conflicting.
Like a conflict?
So, yes.
So let me clarify, because it totally does sound like a conflict. IAM solutions are an IT project. It's technology. It's run by IT guys. So you want dedicated people with the technical understanding and the depth and the experience to be able to implement that project and manage the project. But you want the decisions on access rights, roles, attributes, authorization, all those decisions to be made by the people that matter, by the business. So it's kind of a team. You have the guys who make it happen, but you also have the guys who tell those guys how it needs to happen. Did that clear it up? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Make the business a piece of the earlier you get the business involved, the more success you're going to have. If the line of business is a big fan of your IAM project before you spend a single cent or start working on it, you're going to be successful. If your line of business folks are coming in after the fact and told, here's what we did, and you're going to like it, they're not. So.
Comment to this, if you don't mind. Very important for business to see results. So when you choose the solution, take a look at the solutions which can bring you median results, not at the end of the project. They want to see results every month. You bring them in and say, listen, what we're building is not going to be forever, and results you can see very quickly, some of it. So they know that some of their recommendations or some of the requirements are already there, even though it's not maybe in production fully, but at least you can see the progress. And when they see the progress, the business, they'll appreciate your work much better. That's what be my comment.
Well, and if you remember, I talked about that oil and gas company with the Sun framework, and they got it right. They were really smart in the way they designed their second generation IAM project. They built it with very specific milestones that would show well to the business. And it wasn't like, at the end of this project, here's what we're going to have. It was 3 months into the project, here's what you, Mr. Line of Business guy, is going to see. You can click here and you can request your access and everything will be provisioned automatically. And then at 6 months into the project, that same guy is going to be able to do his attestations with a point and click and from a dashboard, and it'll be really easy. At 9 months into the project, all of these passwords everybody has are going to go away and they're going to have unified access. And at 12 months into the project, we'll have multi-factor implemented, but it'll only be required when the risk is sufficient to require it. So we'll have an adaptive authentication thing. That's half of that I made up, but that's kind of the way it went. They only half. I'm not telling you which half. Yeah.
I listen to that, but I'm thinking, how many companies do you see where this is turning around? And the reason why I'm saying that is in the past, you're right, you would look for business capabilities, define requirements, get them funding approved, and then actually start building something. What I see is that we have a unique opportunity at this time, and with traditional products now evolving more and more into services and solutions that are bridging the digital world,
Mm-hmm.
I see that our business partners are looking for us to provide them with the information of what should be in these digital product features. And so I don't think this, at least for me, this traditional way does not work anymore because my business partners will not ask for solutions.
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell them what the new digital world demands. Is that something that you see elsewhere as well?
No, I think that's absolutely accurate. I mean, you run the gamut. So you have the people that don't want to make any decisions. They want you to tell them exactly what to do. And then you have at the other end of the spectrum people that don't want you to tell them anything. They want to tell you what you're going to do for them, and everything in between. I think, the more mature an organization is in IAM, the more they're going to lean towards that. We know what we want to do, and you're going to help us do it. And the less mature they are, the more they're looking for somebody to say. And George is one of our governance gurus.
Yeah, I think to your point is well taken that the business is looking to us for a set of solutions. I think the key insight that sort of we're looking at right now is that pivot from ceasing to look at identity governance as an IT automation play, as an IT enabler, versus saying our first job is really to enable the business. And hand in hand in that, enable the business to operate securely. And whether that is we're going to come and we're going to give you solutions and say this is what you need to do, but the key understanding is that we need to be, in order to stay relevant, we need to be intimate with the business and have their needs first, and only automate, make our lives easier kind of on the back end.
Yeah, thank you, George.
Points well taken.
Yeah.
All right, so one of your slides said, hey, you need to focus on. Hey. One of your slides said you need to focus on risk rather than ROI. And that's sort of confusing to me because I see an IAM solution as there's really two areas of risk that it solves. One is the having too many passwords, so many that you're going to have very easy passwords. You're going to have them posted on written down on your desk. And the other area is people having access that they shouldn't have. It's really incorrect provisioning or lack of decommissioning. But the rest of the value that I see in an IAM solution is really an ROI decision. It's hey, speed to market,
Right.
0-day access, reducing help desk calls, all that stuff. So, but I'm just curious what other risks that you see this solves.
So let me clarify a little there. Thank you for that, because obviously there is a large ROI play. You're automating things, you're making things easier. A lot of times it's really difficult to prove. I mean, how many of you know exactly how much it costs to reset a password? So yeah, of course, that's why you brought it up. But I mean, how many of you know the true cost of somebody being not fully provisioned for the first week that they work? So there's ROI is great, but sometimes it's hard to prove. And the line of business folks are used to very much things. If we invest this much money in this, we can expect this much return. And that's a little harder to prove. But you can, and just saying the automation, look, everyone will be more productive, all that is absolutely a legitimate selling point. I think the point, I know, the point I'm trying to make is that don't forget about risk. You have to throw that in there as well, because in today's landscape, risk is the big risk, I guess, if you will. Yeah. We got 2 minutes, by the way.
Okay, part of it is management buy-in. Okay, assuming you're going to somebody who doesn't even know what IAM is. I really like the lead-in line that basically says, IAM is critical to protecting people and things.
Now, I have an answer to that, but I'm very interested in how you would answer if somebody says, oh, well, how does it do that?
Well, I mean, so first I'll take that red book and give it to your boss, give it to the business person. It's a remedial, yeah, I'll sign it if you want. It's a remedial read on, here's the basics of IAM and here's why it's important. But the bottom line is people need to get to stuff to do their jobs. In order to get to stuff securely to do their jobs, that's IAM's role. You have to define who they are. You have to give them a way to authenticate. You have to give them authorizations. You need a way to audit all this stuff so you can prove that it's right. And that's what it boils down to. You can't have people doing their jobs if those things don't exist. And so that's the way I always approach it when it's, kind of the introduction to IAM is, all these things you hear, provisioning, federation, SAML, single sign, whatever, that's all secondary. All it is doing is giving people the access to stuff and making sure that they get only the right stuff and nothing else. And that's where I would explain it. I don't know if that's what you would have done, but okay. 43 seconds. Yes?
One of the things that I would add, I like your solutions, is that you as IAM don't have to be the one to do all of those. There are usually, whether you're in a large organization or a small one, there are usually other groups that can do those things better. It's just up to you to put those pieces together. So for example, if you need to have conversations with your business, you don't have a relationship with them, you probably have a business relations group within IT that can kick off and facilitate those conversations. Or the risk piece of it. So in my organization, every SSO connection that comes through that we set up has to go through IT security risks evaluation. So thereby they feel like they're a trusted partner in that process. We leverage their services. We don't have to do the risk assessment. They're doing it. We're leveraging the experts for that. But it also builds that relationship. So all of those things, you could probably find someone in your organization who can do those pieces better than you could.
And if you can convince them it's their idea, that's the secret to success. If you want something done, convince the person that matters that it's their idea, and it'll happen. All right, time is up. Thank you very much. We have 2 more sessions. So the next session is George talking about Joe. Yeah, I pointed at Joe and I said George. Yeah, Joe is talking. What's yours about? You got single sign-on. What's next? Ish. Yeah, that's right.
It's a very demo-heavy session, so lots of demos. It should be fun.
And they're way smarter than me. And then George will talk about kind of this, how do you do the governance thing in the cloud.